Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the show. Today, I had an incredibly insightful conversation with an incredibly interesting person called Diana Baranga. So, Diana is the co founder and CEO of an accelerator program and nonprofit called UpstartED, where she and her team create educational programs that teach students from the age of 12 to 18 things that they can't really learn in school. Things like entrepreneurial mindsets, social innovation, impact-driven action, proactivity, and plenty of other skill sets and knowledge to prepare the next generation in facing the complex social, environmental, ethical, and technological challenges that we're facing. Now, why are these skills so important? Well, I think we've all heard of phrases like the industrial factory-like educational system that ultimately creates good employees. And all great innovators and leaders in the world have to educate themselves outside of school and learn what we can call soft skills, such as how do you learn, how do you work in a team, creative thinking, how to see in terms of solutions and not only problems. And this is what Diana does for a living with her team at UpstartED. Educational programs that teach soft skills and other, also hard skills at the same time, are actually only available to a tiny amount of people around the world, and this is where independent organizations like UpstartED come in to make these curriculums accessible to people of all backgrounds. All right, here's Diana Baranga. All right, well, 3, 2, 1. Diana, it's a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here.
Why don't you start off telling us about this main organization that you're working on, UpstartED? Just give us an overview of what exactly is this.
Absolutely. So, UpstartED is an education nonprofit. Our mission is to empower young people to build a better future for themselves and for society as a whole. Our focus really is on how can we enable young people to create a better world through the social impact lens. So we work a lot on entrepreneurship, technology, but really under the bubble of social innovation and sustainable
Mm-hmm.
business practices. We also put a lot of emphasis on personal development and social emotional learning so that when students are prepared for the future, it's not just about having the right knowledge or the right skills, but really having the mindsets to tackle complex challenges.
Now, this is for kids in high school, normally, high school age.
Right, between the ages of 12 to 18. And the reason for that is, in my personal experience and in the experience of many people who've gone through our programs, that really is a transformative period in people's lives. It's
Mm,
also the period in people's lives when you tend to put yourself in a box because of the way the education system
right.
is set up. So that's why we decided to focus our efforts at that age, on that age group, to help students go through that transformation, kind of see the opportunities that are available, and
Mm-hmm.
have a channel for exploration and self-expression.
Yeah, this is the age where you're obviously you're mature and you're smart enough to understand like the bigger concepts in society, but at the same time, it's really the earliest you can go to really start discovering yourself and then your passions and then what you want to do in life and then stuff like that. Completely agree. Um, so you talked about this educating a mindset, right? Which is fairly common in these how do you call these programs? Accelerator programs
Yes,
or
yeah, we have certain workshops, but we also have boot camps, accelerators.
Mhm.
Um, but yes, I would say that the mindset is the hardest aspect to change and to mold. And that's why it's so important to do it at a younger age, as opposed
Right.
to when we're already in university or on the job market and it's like, oh man, I have to get comfortable with discomfort. I need to know how to collaborate with people. I need to be open to new ideas and work with individuals who have different points of view. So yes, in my experience, even through Upstart Ed, in the beginning we were focusing a lot on like, what is AI and how do you build an app? But we really
Right.
fast came to the conclusion that that's the easy part. What's really hard is knowing how do I work with different people who have different opinions? How do I align my values with my work? And those are more philosophical questions that
The
require,
soft skills.
yeah, soft skills, and it requires a lot of introspection. So it's a really big part of our work.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. the skills you need for a lot of jobs, coding, those are the hard skills that you can learn on an online course or anything like that. But nowadays I see a lot of organizations putting this emphasis on not what to work on, but how to work and how to work in teams. I had Philippe Meunier, who was the chief creative officer at Sidley, which is a Montreal advertising agency, and then he started this school for creativity called La Factory at Montreal. Have you heard of that?
I do. I have heard. I've attended some events there as well. Brilliant place. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and then everybody is just talking about how important that these soft skills that are not being taught enough in school, and this is becoming a real problem.
Yes. And you know what? When it comes to concepts like creativity and innovation, I find it's such an incredible opportunity to work on these things at a young age. Because, Sir Ken Robinson said that schools beat creativity out of us with a stick. And, well, not word for word, I'm definitely interpreting what he
Right.
said. But, we try in our 20s, 30s, 40s to express creativity or to find our inner creativity, which is great. Yet, imagine what would happen if we work on those things earlier in life so that we don't have to unlearn it, but rather it's fostered from a younger age. We're all innately creative. And I actually, on our podcast, the Candid Coffee series, I had a gentleman called David Elliott talking specifically on that note, how a lot of us young people, you think that if you're not good at art, you're not creative. It's not that kind of an equation. Art does not equal
Yeah,
creativity.
I completely agree.
So if we have more opportunities to, I think, encourage people to practice creativity, encourage young people to show how their creativity translates, not just in the arts, but in the sciences, through technology.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like that would be incredibly empowering.
We talked about just this concept of creativity with Philippe Meunier. We obviously create what we understood was creativity was not, it should not be, even though it is commonly associated to art, graphic design, and being an artist, painting, but it is an extension to any single field of work. We talked about how scientists, Nobel Prize winners are incredibly creative, entrepreneurs even more, because you have a million options to do in business, and the only way to succeed is to be creative, and I totally agree. And what is kind of like the main problems you see with the general education system regarding these soft skills?
I think there are a lot of challenges. The focus right now is on getting a certain grade that gets you to that next level in
Right.
the education cycle. And the truth is that not everybody is academically inclined, and that's okay, right? We have right now a system that favors only a certain type of learner, a certain type of thinker, and that is a huge disservice to the majority of the population. So in that respect, because we place a lot of focus on standardized testing and getting the perfect grade, we don't necessarily take as much time to think about our own aptitudes and explore those aptitudes in different contexts. And yeah, when it comes to just, building your life around grades, I remember I was very much a teacher's pet. I wanted to be that A student, and it was great. I mean, look, I got into McGill. I'm very grateful for my education, but sometimes I think, man, had I had more opportunities to explore my likes, my dislikes, practice creativity, expand my soft skills, work more in teams, come face to face with complex problems, be allowed to fail in school when I was in high school, I think I would have chosen a different path for myself for university and beyond. So,
Right.
and that, by the way, is a big portion of it is just failure. For example, I think one of the things that is missing in our education system right now is the ability to be iterative when it comes to learning. So what I mean specifically is, for example, you take a class and you have a midterm exam and then a end of year exam. And you may have assignments, but you get graded at every point. At the end of every chapter, you pass a test, you get a grade, and then you move on to the next chapter. So you don't necessarily have the time to go back and see, okay, why did I get 60% instead of 100? Let me focus on that 40% and try taking this test again. So we're always moving on to the next level, to the next level. Whereas, in the context of entrepreneurship, or even in the context of science, you run an experiment, and if you fail, that's okay, because you have to learn from that failure. It's a hypothesis. So, the hypothesis was proven or disproven. Let me try another test and another. But our education system doesn't allow for failure. Like, if you make a mistake, too bad.
Yeah, it
You're
feels
not
incredibly harsh.
Yeah, the doors are closed. You can't necessarily go back and try to improve and iterate. And you know what, Mincy, we have an accelerator through UpstartED.
Hmm.
And one of the big things that we do with students is every month we have them pitch their ideas again and again and again. And every month we give feedback and help them improve incrementally.
Yeah.
And what we saw is that at the end of the 4 months of the accelerator, students were still coming back to us saying, oh, but can I have more feedback? Can I have
Right.
more feedback? Because they weren't intimidated by the fact that they didn't do well. They were actually excited about how can I get better, So that's what I wish we could take this kind of approach and mentality and infuse it into the way school is done traditionally.
Yeah, I imagine it like, like a school is like a river, fast flowing river. And then if you don't keep if you stop, if you trip once, you might just get sent all the way back. And I've known a lot of people who don't necessarily do well in school, but that if you give them some time, they just need, I feel like there is not enough of a feedback system loop in these education systems as well.
Absolutely. And that's just the fault of the system. Because at the end of the day, I have so much respect for teachers, and they
Yeah.
try to do the best that they can. But, some constraints are out of our hands. They're beyond what one individual can do. And this is where I'm personally very fascinated about this idea of spreading educational accountability, um, about society-wide learning mechanisms in education. Because, okay, let's say, fine, that student won't learn to fail through school in the traditional sense, but
Right.
maybe there are other opportunities outside that immediate, like building, where they can practice these soft skills. That is something I'm especially interested in, because we can't expect that just the school itself is going to fix all problems and prepare young people for the future. We need corporations to have a place at the table. We need nonprofits to be accountable, obviously parents to be accountable, community organizations. Like, there needs to
Right.
be more of this village approach to raising this next generation of leaders.
There are a lot of topics we're going to be talking about, so I'm just going to go one by one because there are just so much to say on these topics. Um, with these, like teaching the mindsets, another thing I've noticed myself in my personal life was um, kids, well, at least the kids I know, they see a certain amount of opportunities, but these are the opportunities that people go out of their way to present them, but they
Right.
aren't exactly aware of the part of the iceberg that's under the surface.
Mhm.
Um, one of the example was this podcast that I'm starting. I wanted to kind of like have these conversations, be able to, you have debate clubs and stuff like that, but
Mhm.
this is just kind of my way of digging a tunnel on the street and just doing it myself. And a lot of kids that are like taking initiatives, they see these opportunities, and
Right.
but most people aren't aware of how much resources that are available to them.
Yeah,
And I don't know. I think I feel like this needs to be talked about. The
absolutely.
resourcefulness of as a quality.
Absolutely. I think being resourceful is so important. This is where it goes back to, and I think back to myself when I was in middle school, high school. Mm, It takes a certain degree of confidence to seek out resources.
Mm,
And sometimes I think it's also a privilege to have the time to seek out resources.
right.
If you're the kind of kid who is not academically inclined, who already has a lot of challenges in their personal life, do you think that they feel empowered to seek out resources? So I think
Mm,
there's something to be said about how can we bring those resources to young people and make sure that those resources are accessible to diverse populations. So to give a concrete example, the reason why we created UpstartED is we saw in 2016 that there were these amazing resources in the local startup ecosystem. We had Startup Weekend, we had Nauman House, um, Montreal Green. There's so many incredible things happening here locally. And at the time, I had approached a certain organization to say, how can we open up this event for people under the age of 18? And the reply was, I'm sorry, it's too hard because of legal reasons, because young people are hard
Yep.
to work with, because and it's like, okay, but we have all these resources. We need to build a bridge to young people and bring those resources to them, or at least remove the friction so that number one, as you said, they are aware. And number two, they feel that they have permission and it's not that hard to reach out and get access
Right.
to resources. That is, I think, that's why we created UpstartED in the first place, because we saw that this gap existed. Um, and we try to take these resources and bring them into school. Because look, I was, I mentioned I was a teacher's pet. I was like a straight A student. Well, I tried to be, because that's how I defined success in my head back then. But I was very shy. And
Right.
like I I was afraid, I was insecure. It's also super intimidating
It
reaching
is.
out to, like,
I
and
experienced it firsthand, absolutely.
that's it. Yeah, and it's totally normal. I still feel intimidated now when I'm 28 years old, let alone when I was, 14,
Yeah.
15. So I do think this is the responsibility of um, organizations
Mm.
that serve youth, or organizations that are going to receive youth into their companies, to build that bridge intentionally and to reach out.
No, I'm really glad you mentioned this because now I realize why, you know, maybe people are resourceful, but it is really a question of confidence and how much you see yourself, how valuable you see yourself. I remember I was not a particularly confident kid at all.
Mhm.
But something happened. Maybe I think I read some self-help books or something, but it really had me shift my paradigm. And
Mhm.
you have all these things available. You just do it. Don't care about what anybody thinks. But this is not easy to learn for a lot of kids.
It's
And,
not,
and no, I completely agree.
especially when you come from the a system of education where they say that you have to be perfect, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's why a lot of young people don't reach out, or that's where my personal intimidation comes from
Hmm.
when I am faced with these things. Like, oh, what if I'm not eloquent enough, or what if they think I'm too young, or you know what if they're not going to even reply to my message? What if? And this is where teaching young people that it's okay to get a no. It's okay that someone won't reply to you. And by the way, just because you're young doesn't mean you don't have value. These are just things that young people need to hear, so that hopefully they feel a bit less intimidated and more just brave
Yeah.
to reach out and to seek out those resources.
Absolutely. And Alishba run a girl who was in the Knowledge Society, which is a very well-known human accelerator program in Toronto, and she told me about this technique that they're teaching at the Knowledge Society was cold emailing, cold contacting people for advice, for feedback.
Mhm.
This takes a lot of guts, really, and they're being taught to do this.
Oh, yes, it really does. It really does. I think my one advice to young people, because I think that's one thing to say, teach cold calling and cold emailing. One thing that we do at UpstartEd instead is teach young people to recognize individuals whose values align with theirs.
Mm,
Because this is actually why I said yes to when you reached out to me. You pinpointed exactly what I do and why you wanted to speak to me.
right,
And then I looked into your work, I looked into your background, and I was like, I think I can have an interesting conversation with Nixie, because I feel like our values align.
right.
So taking the time to find those people and being taught how to identify individuals, who may have a similar philosophy, similar values, who you can connect with in a genuine way, as opposed to connect just for the sake of connecting, because
Right.
you're a fancy schmancy woman or man with a cool title. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
there's something to be said about being intentional about seeking relationships. And 20, 30, 40, doesn't matter how old you are, you still look for genuine connection.
Honest, yeah. No,
That's where
there's no like sleight of hands, like you want to try to take advantage of the person.
no, it's just
Yeah, yeah.
genuine connection. And if you reach out in a genuine way, um, people will say yes. the other thing that I will tell young people listening to this podcast is people like that feeling of helping others, like
Absolutely.
gain a sort of certain satisfaction from that. So if all you're asking for is some advice, some guidance, sure, of course. I've never really been in a situation where I've asked for advice and had someone say no. So that's just a little tip.
No, this is so important to know that people are nice generally, especially people like in the upper levels of their career. They want to give back as well. They are human too.
They're human too.
Yeah. And also, what we talked about reminded me of a study I read. I forgot which, it was in maybe a Malcolm Gladwell book or something. I don't remember where it's from, so don't quote me on that. But the idea is that kids who come from wealthier families, they usually have better opportunities. But that is not only because their parents have connections, but because they're a bit entitled. They're very assertive usually because they have a lot of confidence. They came from nice backgrounds, and these people get more opportunities because they have this quality of being assertive, of telling what's on their mind and speaking up. While people who come from poorer backgrounds, like immigrant children, for example, they are less assertive and they don't want to speak up, and they're exactly more shy, less confident in speaking up, and they get less opportunities. Some idea in this route, and I found this really, really interesting that the things you are taught just with the background can, in a way, chain you from reaching these opportunities.
Absolutely. It's also why, people ask us, how is UpstartED different from a TKS? Because you mentioned them and I have so much respect for what they do. I would say our philosophy is about not just finding the 1 or 2% brilliant children in Canada and in the world, but working by the assumption that every single person has innate and incredible potential. And how can we design systems that uplift the majority and uplift all young people? Because what that happens is, in return, it benefits the economy at a larger scale. Because you're going to have CEOs, CTOs, you're going to have C-level executives, but these executives, in fact, they lead a company full of individuals, right? And the more we can invest in the people who are working in these companies, I think the better off our economy will be, our society will be. So going back to your point about opportunity, that is why it's so critical to work on the soft skills, to work on the mindsets, especially in contexts where you have youth from low-income households, marginalized communities. That's where the focus needs to be, because students who have had access to a private education, such as myself, I'm super grateful, but I recognize the privilege in that.
Right.
Like they're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. But we then have a responsibility to uplift others, and to make sure that at least let's try to even out that playing field, So, I think you say an interesting thing. And the other thing I will add is around privilege. And I was doing a podcast episode with a young woman who said to me, Deanna, the fact that you were able to quit your job and even create this startup is a privilege.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, because people usually say like, oh, you're so brave, you quit your job, wasn't that hard? And I've always felt a bit uneasy hearing those things until now. And now I understand why. It's because I could afford to quit my job. I don't have to send money back home. I don't have siblings that I have to support.
Yeah.
So I am very privileged to have the opportunity to create, an innovative company. Not everybody has that opportunity. So it's also why when it comes to UpstartED, we used to place a lot of focus on having people be entrepreneurs, until I realized that not everybody needs to be an entrepreneur. Everybody can have social impact, and just kind of understanding where are people at and what is their capacity. you know?
Mm. I think you don't necessarily have to be an entrepreneur, but it's important to have a mindset of an entrepreneur who's
Absolutely.
actively seeking out things, opportunities that could change the world for the better and seek impact and value.
Absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
also had another similar idea, which is these, these human accelerator programs, but they're kind of a complementary, besides school. But I
Mhm.
thought about these like specialized education for, for younger people, starting at a younger age instead of, maybe in university or just, 'cause I see this in sports, in basketball, in football, American football. It's that, kids are recruited very early when they're like 13, 15. And then you can play in the big leagues and the professional leagues when you're like 18 to 21 and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I think there is definitely space to explore to do the same with maybe entrepreneurs, innovators, computer programmers, software developers, or something like that, and just really be laser focused at a young age for people who know what they want to do in life.
Absolutely. You know, had we had this conversation a year ago, I would have been like 1,000% yes. Now I'm like, yes and no. And let me explain why. I think exactly as you said, for people who know, it's phenomenal. Yet the majority of young people do not know. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, a lot of the adults do not know, unless you already know that you're going to become a doctor, a lawyer, an
Right.
astronaut. Even me, myself, in my 20s, I've already had 3 or 4 different careers because I feel like my interests are multifaceted. So putting young people in a tight box from a very young age can be great for those who understand that this is what they want. But
Mm.
for other people, it's about exploration and having time to explore. Um, and you know what I would do? Like ideally, if I could do things my way, is try to expose young people to many different types of opportunities, just to play and to experiment and to
Yeah.
develop skills and keep honestly to keep that idea of experimentation and play, because you know what, once you enter the workforce, that's it. Sure, you have some
Mm-hmm.
flexibility, but this is the one time in your life when you should be trying out new things, you should be playing. um, so I would say, I'm kind of like in between
I'm
on.
glad you disagreed because
Hmm,
especially when you're so young, a lot of people say don't settle, right? Don't settle already. You have so much room. You have so much room for mistakes that you can bounce back on, and you should keep your eyes open. And it's very people are very lucky if they discover what they like to do very early on. This is a
oh,
really small minority.
absolutely. And I'm reading this very insightful book called Brainstorm. I forget the author, but I'm sure people can.
Brainstorm. I'll link in the description.
Great. And it's about the development of the adolescent brain. So it's very much the science of how do brains develop. And I had no idea that we go through a period of adolescence from our teenage years well into our 20s,
20s.
which is so there's such a thing as a teenager versus an adolescent. And yeah, like well into your 20, 21, 25 even. And what is happening during that period of time is your brain is changing, and you're exploring who you are and who you want to be. So I feel like there's a lot of merit to keeping your own options open in this time of exploration, in this time of unknown, just from a biological standpoint. The adolescent brain, what happens is like you are a lot more prone to taking risks,
Mm.
to experimenting, um, and then you kind of like settle down in your late 20s and onwards. But that's why I think that the more opportunities you have to explore and to try things out, the better. The better it will give you that freedom to understand who you are as a human, what you care about, and to explore the different facets of your personality and of your interests.
So the biology suggests that somewhere in your late 20s, 30s, that's when your brain starts to seek less risks and not opportunities, risks.
Risks, exactly. You're basically an adult now. It's like, okay, and it goes through that period of change. So you exit childhood, you start entering into adolescence. It's a survival. It's part of you being able to survive biologically. Like
Yeah.
you push your parents away, you kind of, push authority away, and you're taking risks. That's why we see a lot of teenagers doing crazy things. I think that's also why a lot of adults are like, teenagers are crazy. But I I value this adolescent period because you're able to see things in new ways, in creative ways
Literally,
that,
biologically.
yeah, literally. So that's why I am a fan of, yeah, start companies for sure, but don't put yourself in a box at a young age.
Yeah, I completely. And then how do you feel in regards to this right now? You're kind of in this transitional period between adolescent thinking and adult thinking. Now, do you
Yeah,
think about these stuff? Like how are we gonna adapt later on?
I do. I do. I already, I'm not sure if it's because of my brain or just because of,
Yeah.
time and like now I know more things about the world. Not that much, but I know a little bit more than I did when I was 20.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I definitely feel that a lot of the experiences that I had in my 20s have helped me understand who I am. And you know what? I already know that this is just the start of the road for me. I know that I love my work at UpstartED. I'm very passionate about that. But I've also been able to acknowledge that I have other interests and I'm
Yeah.
already kind of thinking about what the future holds. So there's a certain fear of never really settling down because you're human, you change. But there's also
Mm-hmm.
an excitement to know that you're going to be experiencing many things in this lifetime. And it's also a product of this decade in particular, right? Look at what's happening in terms of technology. Some jobs that exist today didn't exist a few years
Yeah.
ago. So whether you want to or not, you need to be comfortable to adapt. So the more we're comfortable with discomfort, the more we can learn from adolescence, the better off we will be as adults, I think.
I completely agree. And when you're an adolescent, you take more risks. But that's a period where it's important to get out of your comfort zone because
Mhm.
you're less likely to do that. I know I completely agree. And what do you think is the state of education in light of COVID, in light of this new way of learning?
That's a really good question. Here in Montreal, already what we saw is that when COVID hit, a lot of the private schools were able to right away migrate the classes online. Um, the public schools did not benefit from that advantage. So, like right at the get-go, the gap between those who can afford and those who cannot
Yeah.
widened. The opportunity gap, I mean. So I'm definitely worried. Um, it's something I think about every day. Really, how can we? And look, it's not about fixing a broken system. I used to say that in my early 20s that we have to like fight the system, change the system, it's broken. Now
There's a much deeper problem.
there's a much deeper problem, and it's systems. It requires systems thinking, and this is where I believe it's necessary more than ever before to spread this educational accountability, to support schools and teachers, to acknowledge that there's a limit to their capacity,
Yeah.
to recognize the job that they have and think, how can we best support them without burdening them even more? So I don't know what that future looks like, but education is an industry that hasn't changed in a very, very long time. And even with
Yeah.
COVID, a lot of people are like, well, when we go back to normal, dot, dot, dot. I don't think there's a going back. And we should not go back to what was before COVID because we know that it was not serving young people. So this is an opportunity to rethink, and it's necessary to rethink the state of education. But I don't have that answer yet. I'm actively
it's a big
reflecting on it.
question.
It's big, and it doesn't take one actor. It really does take many different people. Um, I just wish to see more corporations playing a role in this, um,
In
and
which way?
not just because of corporate social responsibility to say donating money to a school or donating money to an organization, but having more potentially mentorship programs. Um,
Mm.
so how they can offer things that are complementary to the curriculum. Um, there is a need for that because ultimately these young people, they're going to enter the workforce, they're going to work for these companies, so companies need to play a more active role.
Bridging the gap between school and work, professional work.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, I agree, because schools are being education is being handled by schools and work is work. It is two, you can say two distinct parties, and then maybe you have some internships in between, but playing a more active role, that is very interesting.
It's something to think about. And because I work in education, there is a lot of apprehension about having corporations in particular involved in the school ecosystem, because at the end of the day, you don't want to just be promoting a brand. That's not what it should be about.
Yep.
It should be about bringing opportunities to young people that help them understand, as you said, what their options are and interact with these older humans that could become mentors that can help increase an individual's social capital, right? So that they have connections. I believe that is important. I believe it's necessary. It's also why through UpstartED, that is a big focus of ours. And when we work with partners, it's not just about sponsoring our programs. We actually hold different roundtables throughout the year to understand what is happening in healthcare, what is happening in cybersecurity, how do we adapt our curriculum and then take that to educators into schools. So these opportunities of thought leadership, I believe these are critical as well, because we know that the school curriculum is not keeping up the pace with, it's not keeping up with the pace of change happening in industry. So that's another opportunity. And the last reflection on this point is along lifelong learning. Somehow, companies need to develop internally systems, not just for training employees, but reskilling and upskilling employees if you want to retain that talent. Because this new generation that's coming in, they will want to try out different things. And you're not going to have someone stay for 25 years at your company in the same role. So there's something to be said there about lifelong learning, about companies understanding how to share their knowledge and how to teach, upskill, reskill. There's a lot there.
What you learn in school, it hasn't changed much in the last couple of decades, like the material itself, the substance. But the tech companies, they're going lightning fast, especially with AI and the machine learning and so many technologies out there.
It's why we brought AI into our curriculum last year as part of our programs. And even then, because you're in education, you have to ask yourself, it's not about promoting technology to young people. It's about empowering them to leverage it in an ethical, responsible way. And that's the piece that UpstartED tries to fulfill. Because, we talk a lot, we introduce kids to entrepreneurship. We're introducing them to mobile. We're introducing them to AI, to all of these cool, fancy things. But something that is absolutely necessary for young people is to teach them how to be responsible, sustainable. If we're teaching young people the Silicon Valley model, if we're teaching people to create technology that does not serve the end user or that is not inclusive, then we have a problem. So there needs to be some translation between what is happening in industry and what is taught to young people.
And I saw this in the website that UpstartED is aligning a lot of its values with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes, absolutely. It's a framework that we love. Because it's a framework and it creates a common language. It's something that is pursued across the globe. And if we can help young people be aware of these challenges and empower them to tackle these challenges, I think we can affect change at a greater scale.
Right. And just for people who aren't aware of the UN SDG, it's a long word, so I'm going to can you just elaborate a little bit about that and explain what these developmental goals mean?
Absolutely. So it is a framework. I'm not going to list all of them, but quality education, no poverty, gender equality, partnership for the goals. These are certain goals that are intended to steer humanity in the right direction to fix or to address the biggest challenges of our time. Because we recognize that there are a lot of initiatives happening globally. When the goals were created, it was about how do we come together for a common purpose. And that's why we use it in the context of education. They're also very simple to understand. Unlike many bureaucratic things and complex principles, it's very simple. So yeah, that's the UN SDGs. And the other thing is that, when you work on these sustainable development goals, you want to know how one goal complements the other. So for example, if you are working on gender equality, well, maybe you also need to be thinking about how do we tackle poverty and access to resources. So I like the goals because they help look at challenges in a more systemic way. I think the systems thinking approach comes back with the goals.
And another thing I noticed with especially this generation is that, as you mentioned, there is a shift from traditional Silicon Valley business and, so in a way, social innovation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's really big. Now more so than ever, what I love about young people is that they're not just hashtagging their protests. Like, yes, there is
a part of them.
There is that, but there's also tangible, concrete action. People taking to the streets. I mean, the marches we were seeing last year around climate change. There are so many young activists around the globe. They are taking a stand. They're being very vocal. And that is why I believe that, if you're a company, you need to understand what this generation cares about. You need to understand that young people, including my generation, even millennials, we're not going to buy a product unless it's sustainable. We're not going to support a company unless it aligns with our values. And that is really, really important. I think more and more.
Mm-hmm. Right. So some when the Greta Thunberg time of the year cover came out, it outraged some people. People were like, what did she do? All she did was, march in the street and be vocal. There are kids who are building technologies that are solving climate change or whatever, but these people don't realize that what she's doing is putting a lot of pressure and inciting change by putting pressure on existing companies.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly, I haven't even thought about should we applaud or should we not. Honestly, if I'm being super candid, I think people are haters. Look, there's a young person trying to do a good thing. Yes, being recognized, but at the end of the day, people like Greta and young people that are doing things to change the world, they don't do it for the accolades. They don't do it for the recognition.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to make a difference.
She didn't ask to be Person of the Year,
That's it. She didn't. It's not like I don't think that such an individual really thinks about, what award am I going to get if I travel, across the world in my, I don't even know what it was, catamaran or no, and like I don't know what type of nautical device it was. I think she was. I don't know. How did she get from Europe to the US?
It was some sort of boat, raft, or
some sort of boat. Thank you. Some sort of boat. Anyway, so that's what it's about. And this what Simon Sinek has this book. It's called, I don't know the name of the name of the book. I apologize, but he talks about the finite game and the infinite game. A finite game is tied to how much money am I going to make? Am I going to win on the market? Am I going to get that award? It's very much driven by these things that, in my opinion, are superficial, versus someone who's in it for the infinite game, meaning they don't care if today they're not, the most renowned company on the market, they're not getting all the awards, because they don't care about those things. They care about the impact that their company is trying to have, that they're trying to have. So even if they go bankrupt, doesn't matter. They're still in the game, There's no getting rid of them. And I feel like people who dedicate their lives to projects that have this social impact, such as Greta, other activists, even UpstartED, we're not here because we're looking to make a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe in the zero-sum game. I believe there is scope for collaboration. We're here because we genuinely care about the cause. Don't put me in Forbes 30 and there's 30. No, like I don't care about that. I just care about making an impact. So yeah, that's what I would say to people who, kind of don't feel comfortable with
Mm-hmm.
Greta on the cover of the Time magazine. Or look, these people, they don't care about your hate. They're in it for the infinite game, you know?
No, this impact-driven business way of doing business is going to surpass this money-driven kind of business, and it already has in many, many huge companies. And another thought I had was with, for example, Greta going through what did she go to? Where did she go again? New York from Europe, or something like that.
I'm so sorry. I have a horrible memory. I do not know many facts.
No, this is not the information I need to remember
He
right
was
now.
going
But
from Europe to the US.
anyway, so the thought is that this is kind of like you could kind of see as a stunt, but it's an impact driven stunt. I had Cyril Mani, who is he's engineer. He's really interested in space exploration and stuff like that. And we talked about the space race, how America went to the moon, and so much of it was it was sort of like a stunt. It was kind of like get the morale up, inspire people, and the impact that the Apollo missions and all had on the generation was that it got a whole generation interested in science, exploration, engineering, and the impact of that, you can't measure it. You can't measure it, but the impact could be huge. Of just maybe you're not even accomplishing anything physical, but in the minds of a lot of people, stunts like this, marches down the street, it lasts in our memories, probably forever.
Absolutely. And I think a word that I would like to use is symbol. It's a symbol that you can latch onto and that can inspire your own work. And for me, it definitely was that. I'm definitely not the most green, sustainable person in terms of recycling and composting. I do my best, but am I doing everything I can? Probably not. But knowing that young people care about this, and by young people, I mean, the teens that I work with, it's just made me so aware of the changes that need to happen at UpstartED.
Yeah.
It's why we moved from entrepreneurship to social impact. It's why we talk about the sustainable business model canvas, the circular economy, systems design, circular design. So it's about understanding that you need to have an impact, that you're part of this bigger world, So yeah, man, give me the symbols. I mean, look, it inspires change, and I am all for it. As long as you said, it's not the word stunt has something like icky.
Yeah.
The purpose is not to make money. The purpose is to inspire and uplift. So I like the word.
Exactly. I had a thing on my mind, but I can't quite remember. Oh, well, I remember back a couple of days ago when we talked, you mentioned going to school in Tanzania, in Switzerland when you were growing up. What was that about?
Yes. I have had such a beautiful, privileged childhood. I was born and raised in Romania up until the age of 7. And then we moved to Nigeria, Ghana, Tanzania. So I spent about 10 years growing up on the African continent. And then I moved to Switzerland to finish my high school years. I did the IB, the International Baccalaureate. And then I came to Canada. So I really struggled as a child with the concept of identity. In my in my circles, we are called third culture kids, TK. Wait, third culture kids, TCK, third culture,
TCK,
TCK, third culture kids. Wow, yes. I struggled with that a lot because I felt like I couldn't call any place home, because when I went back to Romania, I didn't feel Romanian necessarily, and I definitely didn't feel Tanzanian. I didn't want to appropriate that culture in any way. So I felt like I had no roots. But the older I get, the more grateful I am for the fact that I don't have roots just in one place, because I think it's influenced my values, the way I see the world.
Have a more global thinking instead of like more nationalism feel to it.
That's it. I definitely feel like a global citizen, and I know a lot of people use that term, but I literally like.
Oh, I think we could qualify you as a global citizen.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, Canada is the place where I've lived the longest, and yet the most transformative years of my life were spent in Tanzania. So I think if I had to like rank them, people always ask. I think it would be Tanzania first, then Romania because I have to, and then Canada. It would be like 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Mm. What made Canada the choice for you exactly?
Great question. It was really random. It was, I would say, naivete and ego because, as I mentioned to you, I was a very ambitious student. And when I applied to university, I applied to a lot of Ivy League schools.
Yeah.
And in Canada, McGill was the only school that I applied to. So in the end, I came to McGill because of its reputation and because of the price, like
Yeah.
although we have been privileged as a family,
Mm-hmm.
we're basically, middle class. So we said, okay, what's affordable? And yeah, that's how I ended up in Canada at McGill. I had no idea what I was getting myself into coming to this country. It's so cold, but I'm really glad. I think Canada as a country represents who I am as an individual because it's diverse.
And
It's not,
especially in Montreal, which is a bilingual city. It's
that's
it's
it.
it's not a thing in the world to be bilingual. When you
No.
go up to a store and they say hi in two languages, you don't see this
Mhm.
a lot in places in the world.
No, no, you don't. That's why, although, okay, I think my French is still not perfect, so I do still get funny looks in Quebec, but I would feel a bit weird living in another province where all I heard on a daily basis was English. I feel like I would miss
Hmm.
the bilingual switch.
I find it so quirky. It's like bonjour, hi, and then you choose the language you want to speak with the clerk, and
Good. No, it's fun. It's fun. It's another benefit of being here, and also a disadvantage, I would say, for immigrant families, and
mm,
that's a whole other
yeah,
conversation. But I do enjoy living in Canada.
that is an interesting point. It does make it a slightly more difficult because
Absolutely.
English it's more of an accessible language for immigrants. It's easier. I came here when I was 8 years old to
Hmm.
Canada. English was to me, at least to me, it was so easy to learn, and French, and especially French because people stress about having the right syntax, grammar. English,
Accent.
I just feel so accent. Oh man, and in English, I just feel so liberated.
Yeah, it's true. It's but I was joking with my boyfriend the other day, and he was asking me some words in Romanian, and I told him like, let me give you one. He asked me, how do you say present in Romanian? And I said, cadou. He looked at me and he's like, you mean like the French cadeau? And I was like, yes. The point, and he kind of went on this rant of he would ask me words in English, I would say them in Romanian, and then he would just look very, flustered at the fact that it's basically French. So
Mm,
I'm very lucky in that sense. Romanian is a Latin like based
yeah,
language, although we do have some Slavic roots as well. That's why it's hard to learn Romanian. The Romanians understand Spanish, French, Portuguese. So I have that advantage, but someone that's coming from another country that does not have any Latin roots, I could see the challenge in learning a language like French.
and another thing was, I went to a fairly privileged school, and then but nonetheless, there was a lot of immigrant children who grew up within. Well, they're kind of like maximum second generation immigrants. I'm we call it 1.5 because I didn't grow up here, but I was kind of raised here, and most kids are at least trilingual in my school,
Right, right.
and that's a common thing in my school and in a lot of other schools as well. In the island of Montreal, of course.
Yeah, it's definitely it's tough, but it's really beneficial to be multilingual in this day and age. Absolutely.
Yeah, and let's get into the early days of your career. So at McGill, you were
Mhm.
studying political science, if I'm correct.
Yes.
In which way did this kind of benefit you in a way? to what you're doing right now?
Oh, absolutely. You know what? In the first few years after university, I didn't get it. I was like, why? Why? What was the point? I didn't go work for the UN. But I think doing those degrees taught me how to think critically, how to
Mm,
put an argument together. And that really served me because what I went on to do, aside from user experience and design, that aspect, is I worked in customer service. I was part of different customer success teams. I
mm-hmm.
did a lot of client-facing work, and it absolutely served me to know how to think critically. Yeah, it also gave me time to be imaginative, be creative.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it definitely served me in arts education, and I find that it's so needed, especially when you then go into the context of a tech company, um, because you need diversity of all sorts, right? Like you need to have gender diversity, racial diversity, um, but you also need to have diversity of thought and encouraging more people that are coming from the arts to enter a field that has, like, for example, AI, right?
Mm.
You want to have people that are part of the conversation who have studied philosophy, who have studied psychology. You need those
Linguistics.
people.
There's so many fields.
Exactly. So I definitely think it served me because of this, the mindsets and the skills that I developed. Because everything else, look, UX, UI, design thinking, even entrepreneurship, I learned all that, in my own time. So yeah, I'm very grateful to have had that degree. Now looking back, I see the value.
Mm.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you mentioned diversity in knowledge in startups and companies. That in I again I spoke with Philippe Meunier. Um, the most creative people, the most creative organizations are not afraid to go into different domains, different industries of work, and explore the options. And what his School for Creativity, La Factory, was that they really welcome people of all domains, and they actually want that. Just so you can get a opinion from a medical student on an engineering problem, and it might not have, for the most time, it might not be useful, but there are so much to potential.
Oh, absolutely. And it's why whenever we're even doing when we put teams together here at UpstartED, the student teams, we try to have that diversity in all senses of the word because you look at the problem differently. And I think the moment you understand that everybody has unique life experiences, so the more diverse group that you can put together to solve a problem, the better you can ensure that that solution will solve a multitude of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so, so important to have that diversity in all senses of the word. Um, and empowering people who don't necessarily have a tech background to speak up, right? Because I used to feel that way. I was like, look, I have a degree in history and political science, and I'm a consultant at this in this company. Why would I speak up about the
Right, you
architecture
think you're
of
not
the website?
qualified to speak on this.
That's
Yeah.
it. But then you learn better. And I think if only we um, placed emphasis on the fact that different backgrounds bring a lot of value, it would only serve us. I was recently listening to an event put together by the McGill Young Alumni
Mm.
group. They brought together two musicians and they were sharing their experiences, and they said music is incredibly valuable. It brings a lot of joy. There's a lot of value to music and to being a musician, but the salary you have as a musician is very different than the
Right.
salary you have as I don't know, a developer. Why is that? So, or the job of a teacher, right? Severely underpaid compared to someone going back to the context of a tech company. Sure, they're building an app, but this teacher is literally minting a human being. Let's take a moment. So these are just some things I think are really worth thinking about. Just the need to have diversity of thought and recognizing the value in these diverse backgrounds. That is also very important, I believe.
Yeah, and the quality I often associate with this is really people at leading positions have to learn how to be open-minded, how to be not even open-minded, but just aware that there are so many things that could benefit you from these people who don't work in your industry necessarily.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes it's better not to have subject matter experts, especially when you're testing out a product or, testing a solution.
Right.
And of course, always you want to have the end user there, yeah, sometimes you can just bias the outcome.
In a way, testing products, you don't necessarily want people who already know stuff about it. The
Exactly.
product.
That's exactly it. I mean, that's why when you're doing user testing, the best kind of user testing, you're not telling them how to navigate the website, how to navigate the app. You just observe the behavior and you learn from that behavior. Yeah. One of my biggest pet peeves is when I reach out to a company and I'm like, I can't find that button, or I don't know where it is. And then they say, oh, you're not trying hard enough, or, oh, it's easy. But I'm an end user and I am telling you it's not easy.
How are they going to tell the user you're not looking hard enough? Yeah.
Well, that's exactly, like, it's easy for you because you design it and you have that, the bias, it's your baby, but you need to understand how others are perceiving it. So knowing who you're designing for and listening to the end user is really important.
And speaking of this, so you're very into design thinking and design. So what are you doing in that route right now?
Well, I apply a lot of it through my actual work as a CEO, as a member of a team that's constantly innovating, especially in light of COVID. That mindset has served me a lot. It's also something we teach through our programs, because design thinking, it's a method of, I would say, deconstructing complex problems, knowing how to work in a team to create something that's valuable for someone else. And the more I engage in design thinking, the more I appreciate that mentality, because it teaches young people and myself first that you don't need to have all the answers. In fact, answers come from the collective. Most importantly, answers come from the person you're trying to solve. That the best ideas are combined. They come from diverse places. That's why I really love design thinking. I feel like sometimes we don't even tell young people that they're doing design thinking, because it's not about the process itself, it's about the outcome, what they're learning from it. Iteration, failure, all of that is encouraged through design thinking. So yeah, I'm a huge fan.
Design think. I read about this, not a lot, but it takes it. I think, from what I've remembered correctly, it takes a lot of empathy for good design thinking.
Empathy really is kind of really at the beginning, and you have to bring it on throughout. And empathy is really tough because you have to put yourself in the shoes of that end user. So the more you can speak with the people you're trying to help, the more that you're comfortable learning and being curious, the better it will be in this process, as opposed to just assuming you know the answer. And I think that stage of empathy also requires a lot of humility on the part of the person who's trying to solve that problem, because your idea probably definitely your first idea won't be the right one. And you need to learn to let go, to understand that your job is not to protect this one idea. Oh, this is my idea. That's not your job. Your job is to care so deeply about the person you're trying to help that you're actually obsessed with the problem, not with the solution.
You have to be generous, you have to be selfless, you have to really let go of your ego and then be in the other person's thinking, and knowing that you might be wrong at any time.
That's it. And the thing that I remind myself of a lot is just, we get so protective of our ideas, but if we can learn to become obsessed with the problem, the solution won't really matter. So here at UpstartED, it's why we've honestly, since 2016, we've run a bunch of different types of initiatives and programs. And even now, when COVID hit, we didn't just say, oh, let's do our workshops online. For me, that's easy, and it's not sufficient. What we asked was, how can we best serve our users given their constraints and using our skill set? So we ended up redesigning and recreating something new and we had to admit to ourselves that what we did in the past no longer serves our people. So what do we do? Do we like grasp on to no, but we must keep the exact same thing because it's easy for us, it's less painful? Or do we feel the pain, go back to the drawing board, be open to being told that we're wrong again and again and again and again and again until we find the right solution? So yeah, it does. Honestly, I think it takes a lot of grit to.
So what exactly is the new system UpstartED is developing to?
I'll explain in big brush strokes, but we are kind of combining asynchronous learning, meaning students can really, it's about self-paced learning.
Yeah.
With some digital components, but also with some tactile components. Meaning that we are still going to be using some materials, there are still going to be interactive sessions, and it's not everything is just online. And the reason for this being, it may be easy to just run something remote online if that kid has access to a computer and to the internet on a regular basis, right? On a consistent basis. But the truth is not everybody has that privilege again. So that's where a lot of the pain, I would say, was in our design process. Is there are just so many constraints to keep in mind, and you have to get creative about those constraints. So we're going to be launching our first cohort of the program in later this month. So, if we speak in a month, I'll be able to let you know how our prototype turned out. And we've already scheduled to have 3 cohorts this year, so we can actually get, as a team, the chance to iterate multiple times. As I was telling you, we don't want to just assume we have the one answer. We're okay with failing, and we know that it's going to take at least 2 other tries to get something that really hits that sweet spot.
How long exactly is the program? If you're a student, how long are you committed for?
Right. So this program is called Explore, and it's a 9-week journey. 9 weeks, about, I don't know, in hours, about 18 hours of learning, asynchronous and kind of synchronous learning. It's very different than what we've been doing in the past. Last year, we focused on having those social impact boot camps, the accelerator. They've really become kind of staple events at UpstartED. We're really good at running them. But this year, we recognized a need to create a program that doesn't focus necessarily just on the innovation, but about having young people explore their own potential and seeing how they can have impact. So the Explore program is a lot more introspective.
I really like that.
Yeah, more so than just, okay, let's start a business. Before you start a business, who are you? What do you care about? What are your capacities?
Right.
How do we work in a team? That's really what Explore is about.
Really going deep on the personal value and what's inside of you.
Yes.
I think a general thought that are floating around in public space is that start a company and stuff like that. But I heard a lot of advice that people say, do you need to start a company? Why are you starting a company? Don't start a company for the sake of starting a company. And you have to look through your own values, what you're so passionate about, what gets you up in the morning. And if you see that nothing works, if you want to create your own route, start a company in that case.
Just solve the problem. And sometimes it's not even about exactly the company, it's one option. But the question to ask is, how can I have an impact at the individual level, first and foremost? Because there's something to be said about starting a big initiative. There's also something to be said about having impact at the individual level or joining an organization that is already making an impact.
Right.
But, in the past, what we've seen is that students don't necessarily join our boot camp or our accelerator unless they already see themselves as the kinds of people who like entrepreneurship, who have an affinity for technology. And this is, again, when we're like, man, that's great. It's great to see all these enthusiastic kids, but other opportunities exist out there for them. Locally, we have Young Leaders, brilliant organization. So there are opportunities for Mary Hacks. We've heard of all these things locally. But you don't necessarily, if you don't see yourself as the kind of person who can work in a team, who has the potential, who you don't feel particularly smart or whatever it is, you don't even put yourself in that context, and it's such a shame, you know, um, because you don't recognize your own potential. So
Mm.
explore is really intended to help young people reflect on themselves, on their capacities, and hopefully what I would love to see is there's so many people coming to like Mary Hacks that they can't even handle the numbers because people are coming from everywhere, and that's what I'd love to see.
Yeah, and no, I've seen so many new initiatives by students even just to get people out there to try stuff,
Yeah.
to try stuff. I think every guest I've had talked about this at one point. It's that it was so important for them to just explore all the opportunities they have, and
Mhm.
these people eventually they succeed in a way.
Yeah.
Because no matter how hard you try, you're gonna find something, right?
That's it. And just have time for introspection and reflection. And we don't really get that when we're young in the context of our educational systems, because you're always doing homework, you're thinking about the grade. But again, the grade will get you maybe into university. But then, so I was one of those people, I graduated from McGill and I was like, wow, I am so lost. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I care about really. I don't know really what I'm passionate about. I didn't really know myself. It took a lot of failures in my 20s to understand that. So having that moment for exploration, introspection, reflection, and just a time to think about what are the stories I tell myself about who I am and what my personal capacities are. Because yeah, sometimes you're like, you know what, I'm not a nerd. Why would I show up at this event?
Mm.
It's not about being nerdy. It's
Uh,
about, you know?
this I just had a thought that people or other people are putting labels on somebody like you're a food guy. Jonathan Ferrari, the founder of Good Food, CEO, I had him on the show, and then he told me people are quick to label people when he was doing finance. You're the investment guy and whatever. So, and then people think he should stick to that, but no, he got into the food industry, he got into online grocer, and
Mhm.
he discovered this whole new route, and he's doing so well at it right now.
That's it. You never really know. You never really know. And sometimes the place where you belong is I didn't even know. Look, now I'm a CEO technically on paper, but I'm also a learning designer who works in education without a degree in education and without a degree in like pedagogy or child psychology and I'm working on something that is kind of new, you know? So
That
sometimes
is
you don't.
hard to define still. Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't even know what you want, or I didn't even know this existed. Even now, I'm like, what is exactly my title here? Because I do so many different things. I'm also a person who loves, I like doing learning design. I like speaking with our customers directly. I like wearing many different hats. So putting me just in one role and saying, okay, you work on just the marketing campaign and you're just handling marketing at my company, I would be like, I need to do more. Like I
Mm.
want to keep wearing those different hats. So sometimes you don't even know
Yeah.
what your options are.
And what do you wish you had known when you were starting out? You can
My
choose the point in which you consider starting out, but what do you wish you had known?
well, I guess starting UpstartED, I wish I had known many things. I wish I had known about about what it means to be a nonprofit in the Canadian space. I wish I had understood how important it is to have a revenue generating stream, even as a nonprofit.
Actually, could you elaborate on what do you mean by nonprofit in the Canadian space?
So here in Canada, nonprofits, in my experience, we go through a sort of death valley in the first, between year 1 and year 3,
Okay.
because you can't access funding easily. You are a very young organization asking for donations and sponsorships from different corporate companies.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll throw you a bone, give you $500, 1,000, sure. But you can't live off of that, and you
Mm-hmm.
can't necessarily serve the people who you want to serve. But you need to survive because to qualify for a lot of grants, you need to show that you've been around for at least 3 years,
Oh,
that you are
there's a
leading.
physical like requirement to
Oh,
be.
there's an actual requirement, yes.
Okay.
And not only that, But then you're not a charity, because to become a charity, you need to have certain financial records, and there's a lot of bureaucracy around it. So it's really tough. It's really tough being a nonprofit. Um, and when we created the status of our company, we still believe in the need for it to be a nonprofit, but there are also a lot of myths around, well, if you sell a service, then, that's a bad thing. Not necessarily if you're reinvesting that profit margin into something else. Nonprofit doesn't mean no sales. It does mean reinvesting any additional revenue into your initiatives. So I wish I had known that sooner.
Now, has there ever been a thought of privatizing these human accelerator programs, these education systems, or at least in
No,
the sphere of?
no. I think there needs, when it comes for us, when it comes to education, looking at our mission, yeah, it's maybe someday you can have a for-profit that owns certain IP and that can work with the nonprofit, but the nonprofit itself is the vehicle to serve, especially for us, the low income minority groups.
Right.
Like this is still very much fundamental to our philosophy. Um, and honestly, when we're working in the education space, it does help to have that nonprofit label. Um, it's one thing to open your doors as an educational institution to a for-profit company. It's another thing to understand that the nonprofit is there to support you without its goal being to make money, But that being said, I think you can still be a for-profit company and be a social enterprise. I mean, that's what it is, You have you have a company that has a social mission and a purpose. And in fact, have you heard of the B Corp movement?
No, not at all.
It's huge. It's a stamp. It's kind of like a certification for companies to say that they are serving they have a social purpose. And the process of becoming a B Corp is very, very strict and rigid, and comprehensive. So I would say actually to young people who want to work for a social enterprise to just go on the B Corp website, look at the people that are in the database in the system, they've been vetted, and kind of start from there.
B Corp, like the letter B?
Exactly.
I'm just going to reference this later. I think this could be very interesting. Going back to the question, what do you wish you had known? Now, outside of UpstartED, is there anything there?
The biggest thing I would say is just I wish I had known that it's okay to fail in my 20s.
Right.
I don't think it depends, and everybody has their definition of failure, but by failure, I mean, it's okay not to like your first job. It's okay, well, although I really enjoyed my first job, but like, it's okay, it's okay not to be making $1 bajillion right out of university. Yeah. It's okay to not have everything figured out. It's okay to explore. It's okay. I wish I had known that. I understand why I did not, because I have a lot of respect for my parents, and they kind of mine encouraged me to go into a career that would ensure that I was financially stable, right, and secure, because that's what they wanted for me. So I appreciate that. Yet this is where I think that my education could have played a bigger part, to encourage that exploration, to encourage failure, and to make me aware of different opportunities. Because you know what? I didn't even know about like the startup ecosystem here until my very last semester at McGill, when I was part of a club at McGill called Isaac. And I showed up at Notman House. At the time, it wasn't even fully built out or fully renovated. I walked into a room and they were talking about SEOs. I had no idea. That was like another language for me. I was like, what? SEOs? So in that moment, everything changed. And that's when I realized, wow, if me as a person who had a privileged upbringing, access to wonderful education, went to one of the best schools in Canada, in the world, and I still didn't know all my options, what about everyone else? That's what inspired UpstartED. It really came from that. That's what I wish I had known. And that's why, I'm kind of scratching my own itch, hence creating this organization that believes in equal opportunity, believes in the potential of people regardless of where they come from. It's just sometimes we just don't know.
And I have to say something that I felt. I had a lot of pressure for myself by me that because of the honest because of the media, because everything I've seen online
Of
of
course.
these people coming out of university doing startups already. They're starting businesses in university. You have these huge names in popular culture: Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, starting billion-dollar enterprises right in their college dorm. And this put a mindset in my head is that I should strive to go for that. And then, in a way, what happens was, I have this way smaller opportunity for like a regular job. I don't want to take it. I want to find the $1 billion idea. And in a
Mm.
way, I find that could be stunting my growth in the long run.
Oh, yeah, we put so much pressure on ourselves, and I empathize with you because more so you now than us back in the day when I was your age. What we wanted was that great job. We wanted to get into the great school because of our education. I mean, I put a lot of pressure on myself. It's the reason why I came to McGill in the end, instead of maybe pursuing a degree in the arts, which I'm very passionate about as well. I
Yeah.
just, if you go to art school, then you're gonna gonna become a starving artist, which no, you will not. But yet there was that expectation, and we compare ourselves to those around us. There's so much pressure. One of the things I learned in my 20s is you define your own success, and you have to be
Mm.
very intentional about that, because even me, I still fall into the trap of comparing myself and wanting to be somewhere else. But ultimately, this is where that self-reflection is so important. Um, and defining success on your own terms, um, that is a really big part, I think, just of growing up.
And personally, that I think that takes a lot of courage and self-love. And because I try to implant this thought in my head that if I want to be a billionaire right out of college, university, I need to get into software, computer programming, and stuff like that. And then I'm just starting to get a grasp that when I did it, I didn't enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should learn to
Good.
enjoy it, but I inherently I didn't enjoy anything related with that. Particularly, I had such a struggle, and I wasn't having fun. And then it's hard to convince myself that maybe this dream of yours is not going to come true, but you have another dream that is calling to you. But you just have to sometimes find the courage to just drop that initial dream. This is the kind of
Yes.
what I'm struggling right now.
Oh, I get it. I went through that so many times, especially when I left my uh, consulting career. I was only a year in, and
Hmm.
you know, my friends, a lot of people in my entourage, they said, "Wow, what a great job! What a great company! You're crazy. You're leaving this behind for what?" And then again, when I left the job after that, again, I was like, "Wow, this is a really promising startup. They're doing so well." And it's hard not to feel like a failure, but the best thing I've ever done is listen to my gut. And when it feels off, there's something wrong. And I was in these spaces trying to convince myself to just be happy and kind of punishing myself for like not enjoying the process, exactly
Hmm.
as you said, until I said, you know what? I have to just listen to my intuition here. And if this doesn't feel right, that's okay. Let me look into something else, because you and I, you see, we have that privilege, like we
Yeah.
can press stop. um, it's been the best thing I've ever done. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be at UpstartED. And what I've learned is that by trusting your instinct, it's basically an alarm bell that says, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
just saying, it's okay not to like this. Let me go and explore something new. But there's definitely a period of disappointment, of course, in the beginning. Um, but you know what? Like all of these disappointments and failures that I consider personal failures, it's they're kind of like pushing
Yeah.
me in the right direction, and I feel like
Right.
I'm getting
You're
closer to
bouncing
the
left and
goal.
forth just to go into straight. Finally.
That's it. It's just, yeah, these signals that are pushing me onto the path that I need to be on, where I feel fulfilled, where I feel empowered, and where I feel happy.
Mm.
Just trust your gut, trust your instinct. That could be my only advice. And just keep exploring, because there's so much out there. There's so many opportunities. And who knows, maybe you will become a billionaire, but it won't be through the channels that
It
you
would
thought.
be a thing you never thought of, you never imagined, and it probably was the thing you wanted to do all along. But
Yeah, and it takes time. Sometimes it's
yeah.
about timing. Like I didn't even when I did started in 2016, the plan wasn't to become an entrepreneur. I still feel
Hmm.
uncomfortable with that word. I just want to do something good. And then one thing led to another. And when the time was right, I started doing it full time and I discovered this whole other world. So
All right.
trust the process. Trust the
Trust
process.
the timing will come, and when it feels right, it feels right.
That's it. And you will thank your past self for having endured those moments of disappointment.
Right.
And you'll feel proud of your past self for
Mm.
having made those difficult decisions because they brought you to where you are.
Yeah. That's I'm still having just mental jousts on, is this the right career for me? Or should I?
Mhm.
It's hard sometimes.
For sure. The one thing I would also say is sometimes just try it out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's another big part of, I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you only work here for 1 year or like only a few months. Yeah, screw it. Work there for just a month. Work there for 2 months. Work there for a year. Work there for, you know, try it
Yeah.
out and try it again. And when I was kind of jumping around in my 20s, people were saying, well, that's going to look bad on your CV. I mean, if this is what it takes for me to find
Yeah.
what I enjoy doing, then that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to trust my instinct and ultimately end up in a place where I bring real value. And
Mm.
ironically, UpstartED is the longest initiative I've been a part of, because it's allowed me to grow and it's always
All
felt
right.
right. So it will come.
Is there any topics you still want to touch on that you think maybe we didn't think of?
Um, I don't think so. I think if you look at your list, I believe we may have covered everything.
We covered a lot. So I guess we
Yeah.
can end it here then. We have plenty of opportunities in the future, I hope.
Yeah, that's it. That's it, Mingxi. Mingxi.
Well,
Sorry, I
well,
keep
thank you
pronouncing
so
your name.
much, Ningxi.
Sorry, go again.
No, there's no struggle. We don't even have to edit this out. This is the natural part of a conversation.
That's true.
And
And the reason why I keep messing up your name is because I had a roommate called Mingzi at McGill, and
right,
yeah, we were close. So that's why every time I try to say your name, I think of him, of my roommate back in
makes
the
sense.
day.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you so much. I enjoyed talking with you so much. I think this is so insightful, so important. A lot of the stuff we talked about.
I'm glad. I hope, yeah, as long as, look, I had a great time, a great conversation.
Yeah.
And as long as I could share some nuggets of insights and maybe a little bit of young wisdom, then I've done my job.
Well, thank you. Uh, Before we go, is there anything you want to shout out? The podcast. You're starting a podcast as well.
Yes, we do have a podcast. That's a great point. It's called the Candid Coffee, and these are conversations around um, social impact, youth empowerment, and innovation, and just reimagining the education space. So, if that is of interest to your listeners, then you can find us on Apple Podcasts, on SoundCloud, where else on our website. Yeah, we have some fascinating speakers.
All right, the Candid Coffee. All right, thank you for listening. Thank you so much for listening. If you've reached this far, tell your friends about us, and please consider subscribing and leaving a positive rating if you've enjoyed it. It's free, then you can always unsubscribe, but it means the world to me. And also, if you want to stay in the loop, you can follow us on Instagram at The Visionnaires. You can also email us at thevisionairespodcast@gmail.com if you want to say hi, if you want to come on the show, or anything like that. All right, that's it for now, everybody. See ya.